You've been featured on Forbes, HuffPost, the Washington Post, but you started with very humble beginnings.
That isn't who I am. It's not something I want the world to take pity on me.
The growth you had was tremendous. What was your strategy to go from almost zero to hundreds of properties in 7 years?
I don't think people realize that their best is better than they knew. You really do need to screw attainable. I slept under my desk or sometimes in an empty office.
I don't want to settle for this. I don't want this to be my reality.
Do something. If it's two things, I guess do two things, but don't do zero.
All right. Welcome everyone to the Hospitality Edge podcast. Today, I'm super excited to have Karl Scarlett with us.
Thank you.
And, he has a tremendous entrepreneurial story with a lot of lessons in, personal development, just starting from very humble beginnings and making it very far in life through grit, through determination, through just, sheer willpower and also, and a very nice person that has beliefs of doing things with love, of being kind and impacting positively, in society along the way. So Karl, is the founder of, a hospitality company, Great Dwellings, as well as the founder of a technology company, NetAesthetics. And so I'm beyond excited of, having you, Karl, as a guest. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm glad we were able to make this happen. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. And yeah, thank you for the invite. It's an honor to be here.
No, the honor is all mine to have you. So I'd like to start by just talking about hospitality. I want to understand what does hospitality mean to you personally, and how do you try to deliver exceptional hospitality in the way you do things at Great Dwellings?
Hospitality is a version of customer experience. I come from a tech world where the term is often used CX, UX, right? What's the UX design on this app? And what that means from a tech person is when a person opens the app, does it make sense what button to click next? And is it easy to use and is it easy to navigate? And UX is a derivative of CX, customer experience, right? Well, I feel like that applies in tech and hospitality. So if you think of a hotel, when you walk into that lobby or when you pull up to the gate, right? You've been to Quintana Roo. There are some amazing resorts where pulling up to the gate, that curb appeal is like, wow. And then you walk into the lobby and it's a wow. And then that host greets you. And then you get into the room, it's a wow. Hospitality means trying to evoke wow throughout that whole process, right? So we delve in short-term rentals, which for those that don't know is, well, your guests all know, but it's specifically, Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com types. So that wow is delivered from I love how quickly the host responded to me when I said I was interested in that property. I loved how they were ready for me when I checked in. I loved what the front yard looked like, the living room looked like, the snacks that were left out for me. That whole experience, the fact that the guest checked in on me, but wasn't too intrusive and made sure everything was okay. That's what the guest experience is for me. So sorry for the long answer, but it's there's a lot to it,
Love it. No, definitely. And I love what you said about just trying to wow, guests on every single touch point along the way and trying to, to me, it comes down to exceeding, people's expectations is what I think hospitality is all about. Now, Karl, let's dive a little bit into your story. I mean, right now you are a very, very successful entrepreneur. You've been featured on Forbes, HuffPost, the Washington Post, founder and CEO of two very successful companies. But you started with very humble beginnings. And I think there's a lot of insights and inspiration that we can all find from that. So tell us about that. I mean, you started and, you were not homeless, but, I was watching one of your podcast appearances and, you talk about how you were even, doing the line to collect food stamps and whatnot. And your mom taught you a lot of things in
Right.
not wanting to just settle for that and
Live off the
aiming for
system. Right.
more. So tell us a little bit more
Right.
about what that part of your life taught you, and maybe some of the lessons you learned from your mom in just entrepreneurship and trying to make the best out of your situation.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I guess I want to start with, yes, there were elements of my life where I was near rock bottom, but I don't want to let that define me, right? That isn't who I am, but it is an element of how I'm wired. So it's not something I want to ignore and pretend like didn't happen, but it's not, it's not my definition of me, and it's not something I want the world to take pity on me that I had that experience, because I heard some statistic recently. I forget what it was, like 1 in 5 children are still trying to figure out where the next meal comes from. So apparently, it's actually a pretty common situation, and one that I want to help play a role in fixing for people. But anyway, it is my story. So I'll and you asked, and so I'll go into it a little bit. When I was a teenager, or actually just growing up, my mom and I went through all types of highs and lows. We were on pretty much every government plan, from food stamps, Section 8, you name it. And Section 8, I know you're in Canada. Section 8 here is essentially the government pays your rent, or pays as much of it as you need them to help you get by. And they're not always in the best neighborhoods. And then there was a point where we weren't on the food stamps, but we needed food and didn't have any. So we legit were in a chow line right next to homeless people with our hands out in a tray, getting food as our only meal. I mean, one thing I remember pretty vividly, I don't know why, it's like a very stark memory for me, was opening the fridge once, and it was clean. I mean, it looked like someone scrubbed it clean, but also empty. And literally the only thing in there was a pack of bologna. I don't know if you remember the Oscar Mayer bologna that you pull up, and it had the little red plastic on the edge. But when I opened it, and in fact, I felt satisfied, like, oh, sweet, there's something. There were 2 slices in there, and I was like, crap, I'm not going to be the guy that takes the last 2 slices, right? So there were times where life was that tough, where literally we were down to 2 slices of bologna in the whole house. And that has wired my worldview to a degree. I remember closing the fridge, like, I got to make sure life is not always like this. I mean, I
Mm.
remember going to college, and the college was surrounded by rich kids. And I just kind of looked at them and said, I think that is normal, honestly. Maybe not rich, but in fact, I think they were middle class, but to me, they were rich. And I didn't have a good baseline for normal yet. In college, I was still literally trying to figure out, well, the life I've lived has been my normal, but is this everyone else's normal? And so being able to kind of, what's the word, vector my trajectory in a direction, I strived for, not that, right? Not to be hungry, not to, we had a car repossessed once. I remember seeing the guy, the company drive away with it, and thinking, well, how are we going to get to anything anymore? Right. And so remember, just triggering myself to go, all right, this is not what life's going to be like for me as I got older. And luckily it hasn't. And maybe, those experiences made me work a little extra hard, or stay up a little extra later to make sure that didn't happen. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know I spent 5 minutes on it, but it's not
No,
what I
no, no.
want to let
Listen,
define me,
and I love that you specify you don't want to let this define you, and I think
Yeah.
that's very important, because there's so much more that defines you. At the same time, there might be people that are listening to this that are going through a tough situation, or are not where they would want to be.
Yeah.
And I just want to understand, what do you think made it possible for you to be in a situation like that and still think
Yeah.
to yourself, you know what, I can create a future for myself that's different, or
Yeah.
at least, I don't want to settle for this. I don't want this to be my reality, because maybe there's other people that are in a similar situation, and they're not where you are today. So what do you think
Right.
made the difference in your case?
So a couple things. One was my mom. My mom had such a drive to deliver and build and create. So she would have business ideas. I felt like once a month. I'm sure it was not that frequently, but the dream and possibility of starting something, building something that people needed and wanted and were willing to pay for. But when I say that, I mean as an even exchange or as a fair exchange, right? There are things you pay for where you're like, man, thank you, that was awesome, right? I don't know, an amazing meal or a cruise where you paid for it and you're like, wow, that was worth it. So building something that people value and are willing to pay for is actually a gateway out of your situation, right? There was one point I remember we'd go to the fabric store and she was creating shorts, like, short pants. And they got really popular with the church and like some people in the area. And so she was buying shorts and people were like, can I get 3? So she was building something of value, excuse me. And unfortunately, a lot of those things didn't seem to sustain. I don't know, what the reason was. I feel like the biggest was she was a one-man band and that just is not sustainable. But if you think of the free market economy, you're able to build things of value that people want to pay for, right? There are so many SaaS products out there that when they say, hey, $9.99 a month, you're like, I'll do it, right? The app store is like, hey, this app's 99 cents. You're like, worth it, right? You build something of value and enough people find that value, you're able to build wealth. And luckily, I was able to find 2 things that have been valuable to people and worth their investment.
I love it. I love it. No, that's absolutely amazing. And tell me something. So you got a scholarship and you went on to study computer science and work extremely hard to make sure you were able to prove yourself and prove to the school and prove to everyone that they hadn't made a mistake in giving you that kind of an opportunity, right? Which is interesting because you're kind of coming at it from a bit of a place of uncertainty. I would say like maybe there's some level of insecurity there, but at the same time, that insecurity is pushing you to work way harder than others would.
Yes.
I guess the first question there is, how much do you think that insecurity had to do with how much you were hungry and how much work you put in?
Yeah.
And let's start with that, and then I want to talk about the actual education component. How fundamental do you think the actual access to high level education was in you being able to achieve the level of success that you've achieved?
Right. So I think I'm going to tackle both at the same time. So fortunately, I was able to get into a very good college by the name of Wheaton College in Chicago, Illinois. And there, the minimum GPA was, or not GPA, but SAT score was 1260, which is really high. And I think I literally got like a 1260 on my SAT. And I feel like I like lucked, like sometimes you answer the right questions. You're like, I don't know. I think it's this. And then you're like, oh, I passed. Well, that's kind of what happened. Like, I mean, I wasn't a dummy, but at the same time, I was like 1260. Oh crap. I don't think I could get that. I think the numbers have skewed now. So I don't know if 1260 is high anymore, but it was at the time. And so I got it. So then I only applied to one school, and I actually applied to where my youth pastor went. And I actually remember him saying, like, I'm not sure I'd recommend it, but yeah, here's where I went. And I'm like, well, whatever you did, I'm doing. So I applied one school only. Luckily, I got in. But when we filed the financial aid application, I was like, hey, Mom, I'm filing this application. They just want to know how much you can contribute. I can't remember the exact number, but like the school was 20 something thousand a year. Like, let's say it was 20,000 a year. I believe her answer was sub $100 a month. And I was like, whoa, I'm not sure I should submit this. Like, I don't even know if I'm going to go. Like, I didn't realize we were that hard pressed. I knew we were, but like seeing this and that is a big eye opener. So luckily I got a scholarship from the college. Then I actually applied at the same time to the US government, got a scholarship there. And so both covered everything. So everything was paid for. Thank God.
This was all you, by the way. This was all you trying to proactively find ways to finance your own studies. Like,
yeah. I never thought about it like it was me, but yes, I remember going to the bookstore and buying a book of scholarships, and I was like, let me try this one, and I applied, and I got a follow up, and I got responded to by the federal government, and then applying for the college, they asked, there were some financial aid packages, and I signed up for them. So yeah, I guess I was a little determined to fly the coop a little bit and make this happen. That definitely seems to be patting myself on the back more than I feel like it must have went down. But yes, I think I led that effort. And then when I got in, I was like, man, there's a bunch of smart kids here. I think they might have goofed by letting me in. Let me double down. Let me at least be on par. Let me not like be the odd man out. And so I did. I had to work a little extra hard to make sure that wasn't the case. I didn't think of it as I'm the only Black guy here. Nowadays, I feel like race is brought up quite a bit, and I'm not sure why, but at the time I wasn't thinking, oh my gosh, I represent my race, let me step it up. I was thinking, man, I represent me, and I think I might have slipped in here, so let me not get kicked out. But over time, I did realize though that because I was one of few Black people at the school, I was representing the Black race to a lot of people unintentionally, and probably shouldn't have been, but I was, and luckily, I think all in all, it turned out pretty well.
Wow, that's amazing. So there's a bit of an imposter syndrome, and then as you start working harder than everyone else, the results start to accumulate. But that's a process that can take, it can take years and years. Right. So I'm curious to know, you mentioned in another one of your podcast appearances that at some point you just realize, if I just keep working hard, I seem to be getting good results from working hard. I can keep working hard. That's something I can't control. Let me just keep doing this. Was there a moment like that where you said, you know what, I don't feel like an imposter anymore? Or was that something that followed along with you even beyond college, where you almost kept that as a chip on your shoulders of you wanting to prove others and prove yourself that you can always do more?
Honestly, it was in just the last year that I started to feel like less of an imposter, and literally within the last 12 months. I would be on LinkedIn. No, the last year of life, just in the 2023.
The last year of life. Okay.
Yes, yeah. Until then, I would go to things and say, yeah, I started this little property management company. And then, they would say, how many units? I'd say, oh, several hundred. They're like, several hundred? That's not little. I'm like, oh, I guess it's not, right? And I'm like, I started an IT company. What do you do? Oh, well, we did land a federal government contract. I guess it was a few million. And, we did X number. And they're like, what? That's amazing. And I'm like, I guess that is kind of cool, right? But it didn't dawn on me. And I think it all kind of happened organically, but it was a lot of in the trenches. But I want to take this moment to say that a lot of the big wins came when I started to believe and rely on a team. When it was me being up all night, working all night, doing it all myself, thinking, if you want to do it right, do it yourself. Less was getting done. The numbers were smaller. It wasn't as big of successes. In the past few years, I brought on team members. It did require the first couple of years of sacrificing. And, there were people on my team getting paid more than me because, they had to put food on their table, and, I was the one with the vision. But, now both companies are striving, doing quite well. And it's because I relied on quality team members. So it's a 2 points I want to make there. That thank you for inviting me on the podcast. I know you've invited me, and it's a little bit about me, but it's about me learning to value quality team members and bringing them on and utilizing them and relying on them or trusting them. And then, the other part of, well, I guess that's the 2-part, right? It's not about Rashid. It's not about Karl. Rashid being my first name and Karl my middle name. It's about building a valuable team of quality people. So it's not only team, right? You can have the bad news bears and be all messed up, but anytime you hear some majorly successful person, if you really pay attention, there's a team behind them, you know?
There's always a team behind, that's for sure, and they're the ones who make everything else possible. Now let's go back to the story. So you're finishing college, you finish with a computer science degree, right?
Yeah.
Where's your head at that moment when you go out of college? I mean, are you thinking, let me go and start my own company? Are you thinking, let me go and work for someone, let me learn, but eventually I want to start my own company? Like did you have that idea of you wanted to be an entrepreneur and have your own business, or how did that even come about, and what was the timeline for that?
So when I first got out of college, I worked for the federal government. When they told me the offer, it sounded like a huge number, but in retrospect, it wasn't. And as I tried to live off of it, it wasn't. I forget the number, but it was like 48,000 or 49,000 a year. But coming from no money and being a college kid, they were like, "Hey, here's your job offer," and I was like, 49,000. That's amazing. Yes, I'll take it. Then I started looking at the rent prices in DC, and I couldn't, afford rent and food at the same time. So I got a roommate, and things were tighter than I realized. And I had a car note because I thought I had a lot of money. So things were getting a little scrappy, or
and family,
I was strapped. So
family, I imagine,
family,
too, as they see, you made it, right? You made it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I was sending checks all over, but willingly. It was not begrudgingly. My grandmother, I loved her to death, right? She was on Social Security, which was not much. So, I'm sending her every now and then. I'm sending my mom regularly, and she had young kids. And then I got to try to pay my bills. And, like I told you, at 48,000, that just wasn't much. So luckily, like 2 years later was the .com boom. And I mean, like, if your company name said .com and it was like worth millions. And so I knew how to write websites, and I like made a website for a friend. He was throwing a birthday party, and I was like, "Dude, you know what? I could throw together this invitation that I think would be pretty hot." But it was apparently groundbreaking, and I didn't even realize it. Like, it just was cool to me, and something I wanted to do for fun. Well, the owner of that nightclub, which literally made $1 million every weekend night, Friday through Sunday, called me. Was like, "Get him on the phone. Can you make this for me every week?" And I was like, "Yeah, you like this? Sure. Easy." And I'm making like literally a couple grand per flyer per week. So I'm making like $6,000 a week just to do this for this guy on the side. So I turned that into a business. And then that started to grow. And then a friend of mine was like, "Hey, my alumni, my college wants their website maintained." And so that grew. And so I like stumbled into my side hustle, which was the IT business. And so, no, I did not like come out of college saying, "Man, I'm going to start a business." I came out of college just like, "Man, I'm going to figure out this adult life." And then luckily, let me do what I do for fun in the evening. And then luckily what I did for fun was something people valued, and it grew. But actually that business collapsed really fast. I took on like 4 clients, and there was like this point in time where I was just overwhelmed, right? Full-time job, 4 clients. I stopped responding to them. They all got wind of that, could tell, didn't like it. And I lost them all within like 2 months. And so definitely some life lessons there. But the entrepreneur organic.
Had you quit your W-2 job by
No.
that time, or you kept it? You kept it all the way long?
I kept it, which was, I think, what amounted to the burnout. But it was a safety net, right? It was a check that I knew was going to come every week. And these other clients, I knew they were coming every week, but it didn't feel as stable as that W-2 job. So when they left, I went back to the W-2 and I was fine. And in fact, I had gone to a consulting firm. I switched from the government to a consulting firm. It was called Accenture. And I found out what my bill rate was. They were billing me out at like $190 an hour, while they were paying me, a fraction of that. And then when these nightclubs and schools were willing to pay thousands, that's when like a moment went off. You know what? I could turn this into my own business. And I did pursue that.
Okay. So the business, the first business initiative ends up not working out. I mean, the 4 clients you had managed to put together,
Yeah.
for some reason or another, they didn't continue or whatever. Now, what was your
Yeah.
next sort of like entrepreneurial venture? Because you kept on working at a W two. When's the next time did you go through a phase of like, putting entrepreneurship kind of like on pause and just focusing on your job and that's it, and honing your skills, maybe thinking about new ideas, or did you go right into the next thing? Like what was that next thing, and how did it came about?
So the next thing is I started an app. It was called Smarter Vote. And what it was is you would answer a bunch of questions about your political positions, and it would tell you who you aligned with, but it would very much obfuscate political party, right? Because there's some people who vote their party just because it's their party. And so this app was supposed to help you through that and then figure out how to monetize that. And so I was part of an accelerator, and I'm trying to pitch it. And I actually got invited to speak at George Washington University, and it was going well, but it didn't bring in a penny, and it was taking up a bunch of my time and money. And then, but at the exact same time, and unbeknownst to me, but turned out to be more organic, I was becoming a short-term rental entrepreneur. And why I say unbeknownst to me is I had a long-term tenant who didn't pay their rent. And like, I'm crying in my milk and telling my friends like, dude, I'm paying 2 mortgages. And they're like, well, why don't you try Airbnb? So here I am pitching Smarter Vote, like going really hard. But on the side, I'm like, hey, yeah, let's turn that into an Airbnb. But I'm not even really trying. And then the first month, it like makes a ton of money. So I mean, to me. So at the time, the mortgage was, let's say, a little under $4,000 a month. That first month, I was able to bring in like, I want to say like 12 grand. And then the next month, like 16 grand on the one unit. But mind you, I'm still not even paying attention. Yeah, that brought in 16 grand. But dude, Smarter Vote is the future. It's going to be how people are going to vote. And then, a couple of months of it, and I'm like, I think I'm focused on the wrong thing. Like, this thing is killing it, and I'm not even trying. Imagine if I try. So then I got another unit, and I got a bunch more. Then I stopped Smarter Vote, and that took off. And then, so that is what turned into Great Dwellings. And then at the same time, I did start the IT business and landed a contract as a subcontractor to Fannie Mae. And that was literally at the same time. I needed the Fannie Mae money to pay 2 rents, 2 mortgages. And luckily they both kind of like snowballed at the same time.
Wow. Okay. That's very interesting. And by the way, I love how, you don't want to be just defined as any one particular thing, right? You can be both a hospitality entrepreneur and an IT entrepreneur, and do both at the same time, which is impressive. But I want to understand, I really want to understand the timeline of it all. So, okay, so you have this property, the tenant is not paying rent, you hear about Airbnb, you make a lot of money, right?
Yeah,
and then you're like, okay, and after going through the process of, pitching the app, that's not making any money, you're like, okay, maybe I could scale this, Airbnb short-term rental business a little bit further. What did that look like at first? Was it you buying more property? Was it you doing arbitrage? Was it you doing property management from the get-go? Like, let's say you go from the one property you had where you discovered short-term rentals. What was the step right after that? Like, what was unit number 2 and number 3? What model was it?
So my first home was a 2-unit home. Like, literally the first home I ever bought was a 2-unit home. So first unit, the tenant didn't pay, turned that into an Airbnb. The second unit was the basement, English basement. It's like a row home in New York or a townhouse almost. So 2-unit home, converted that bottom unit into an Airbnb. Saw how much money was to be made. I arbitraged a home in Georgetown, which would be like the high-end neighborhood in any city, but everything's nice and condensed. And then I got another property near my first, so I'm up to like 4 units within in a few months. So I owned 1 2-unit, and I arbitraged 2 others. And then that's when the point where a lot of people started asking me for advice, like I was some sort of, like I really knew my stuff. And to me, it wasn't like I'm an expert. It was, I wouldn't say guesswork, but it was man, I'm winging this. I'm figuring it out as I go. I'm actually making mistakes, but seem to most things are working out. But I wouldn't give you any advice right now because I'm figuring it out. But they're like, no, you must, you know more than me. And it happened so much that I turned it into a website because I know how to build websites and I know apps, right? That's what I was doing for the clubs, and hundreds of leads came in, hundreds, to the point where I actually turned off not even turned off the form. I made the form prohibitively long to fill out. Like, I need you to really want my services because too many people are hitting the contact me button. And then, if you went through all the work to fill that out, then you really did want to be a client. And then I would respond to those people. But I left a lot of leads on the table because remember that business I said failed? It failed because I grew too fast and I burned out. And we weren't ready for that growth. I knew that I could barely turn over 4 units successfully every week. I couldn't go to 4 to 104 or 204. So, I only took on a handful of clients and we still had growing pains and then we finally grew from there.
Wow. So what was that? Was that under the brand of Great Dwellings? That website you're talking about was the beginning of Great Dwellings?
Yeah, I wish I could go to the Wayback Machine. Maybe it's on and see what that first site looked like. But I found a template on, I think it was called Template Monster or something like that. Actually, no, it was Theme Forest. I remember. And I tweaked it and it worked and people loved it. And
so that was property management services that you were offering.
Yeah. Essentially, I would manage your home as an Airbnb is what I would say. And people wanted it. People saw the value. And I also needed clients. 4 properties. I 4 properties was too much for me to manage by myself, but not enough to pay a team. So I needed more clients for the economy of scale to be able to pay the team to manage mine, which would in turn manage theirs at the same time,
Yeah, definitely.
And responding to all those guests were impossible. And what I was going to say a minute ago, I still had IT clients. And I couldn't repeat that mistake of letting the ball drop there. So I brought on a team and haven't looked back.
So in terms of, I want to understand the parallel progression of the IT business and then Great Dwellings. So the IT was first, if I'm understanding correctly. The IT was first.
Yeah, for sure.
And so as you were doing, let me understand, because you were talking about the app. The app was
right.
what you had on your head. So that
was my focus?
Was that app under your NetAesthetics?
No, the app was Smarter Vote, and I thought it was going to be its own thing, and I thought it was going to be huge.
Its own thing.
Not being
so you're doing the app. You're like, okay, let me try short-term rentals. And so as you're starting short-term rentals and launching this business, you're starting the other company. You're starting NetAesthetics as well, or when do you start NetAesthetics?
I started NetAesthetics just a little bit prior. It was almost simultaneous. I had a 9-to-5 that could barely cover my cost of living. But then this tenant wouldn't pay their rent. And I had to cover the mortgage of the home they were in. So I got a night job that was willing to hire me as a company. So I would literally work from my day job till 5. The night job would start at 6, which was, they hired me as NetAesthetics. And from 6 till 6 in the morning, I worked that job as my IT company. And then at 8 a.m., 2 hours later, I had to show up at my day job. So needless to say, I slept a little bit at the night job, but not the whole time because I would have gotten fired. So I definitely was sleep deprived, but I did sleep on the job a little bit. But if my former client is paying attention, I actually wrote a bunch of scripts that they should have written in the first place. And the scripts did most of the work that they should have automated. So I automated like half my job. I slept under my desk or sometimes in an empty office. And then there was a pager, and I actually wrote a script where the pager would page me if a process would fall or a fail or it would need attention. And then I'd literally drag myself to my desk, address the problem, which I usually wrote a script to fix the problem, The problem would be fixed in a couple seconds or minutes, and I'd go back to sleep. So I started the IT business as I was waiting for that tenant to leave. Soon as the tenant left, I started Airbnbs, which wasn't quite great dwellings because, again, I didn't even expect that to be something. I just needed to put a renter in. So I put in short-term renters. Then it grew. Then I was like, oh, wait, let's stop. So I guess at one point I'm doing three things: Smarter Vote, night job, and short-term rentals, but not as a big business. Then I realized short-term rentals was a big business. So I turned off Smarter Vote, doubled down on short-term rentals, quit the night job, and then actually left the day job and took on a client as NetAesthetics. So a lot of those things did overlap.
Wow. And so when NetAesthetics was born, what was that kind of a product of what you had done during that night job period? You were doing more of the same, like, for someone that's not a computer scientist like myself. What were you doing with NetAesthetics when you first started? What was the thinking behind what you wanted to build? Not to deviate too much from hospitality, but since you started both at the same time, I just want to understand, what was the vision at first, and how does it go from that to landing multi-million-dollar government contracts?
Well, working at Accenture, I saw that they were billing me out at almost $200 an hour. And I was like, you know what? If I could get one client to pay me $200 an hour directly, then that's worth it enough to start a business. If I can get a client to pay me and my employees or pay for software. So I had the desire to build that, right? And let me build another Accenture as myself, because if I work for Accenture, they're only going to pay me my salary. So the drive was to build my own Accenture, on a tiny, tiny scale. And because I knew it could pay my bills and help me take care of my family. And then I wanted to build the real estate thing. What I thought I wanted was a bunch of rental properties, because I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki book. And so I did that. But when the tenant didn't pay, there wasn't a chapter on what to do if the tenant didn't pay. So that threw me off for a second, revectored. So the vision was to not struggle. I did for a while, but as things started to take off. So I then landed a contract with the government providing IT services, IT consulting, actually, almost spot on what I did at Accenture. They were building out a very sophisticated system, and they needed assistance. And in fact, in my day job, I was supporting them. And when I told them I wanted to start my own business, they were like, you know what? We'll take you. We want you. And so it was a lucky, luck was a big component of that, right? The timing and the people who were supportive of it. So I was able to bill them out almost at, not quite 200, but, way more than I was making as a 9-to-5er. So that transition happened right then as the short-term rentals were taking off. But I will say this, the first couple years, so even though I was saying I was bringing in 10,000, 16,000 a month, that was in the high season. In the low season, it's not even covering the mortgages. But now I got employees. So now there's a different struggle. Okay, how do I cover these employees' rent? I just spent all that money because I thought it didn't stop, but it does. So you got to become a smarter entrepreneur, right? Oh, crap, how do I get through? And I'm not much for getting into debt, but the first year I had to take business loans to sustain those slow seasons and grow the company and make sure the employees got paid, so that they never missed a check. And I did personally miss a check. So those first few years had boom months, but they also had some very tough months. So I don't want people to come away and just say, when everything took off, there were some highs and lows to all of it.
Interesting. Now, I was reading one of the Forbes articles, Forbes Business Council member articles you wrote, and there's one on it was make 2021 your most audacious year. Audacious year, and you talk about setting goals, right? Smart goals. Yeah. We everyone talks about smart, specific, measurable, attainable, blah blah blah. Right. But you're like, screw that, screw attainable. Let's go with audacious
screw
goals.
Attainable for a second. Yeah, you really do need to screw attainable. You know what? My kids used to say a lot that I didn't like, and judge me if you want, but they would always say, I tried my best. And I would say, like, I don't think you know what your best is. I don't think you know yet. I don't think people realize that their best is better than they knew, right? When the teacher says go, run the 100-yard dash for a grade, right? You're in PE. You run pretty hard, right? If a dog was chasing you, I bet you would have ran harder. But after you were done running that first race, you're like, I tried my best. Turns out your best is actually probably way faster, but you didn't have that drive and that push. So give yourself a different drive and a push. Is it, will I cover my bills this year? Or is it, will I build generational wealth this year or build something, right? And I don't want to sound greedy, right? It's not like, will I buy a Lambo this year? It's, will I create a business that feeds families of my employees? And in fact, I overuse this, but I'm just going to say there's 3 wins to a lot of these great dwelling stays, right? When someone stays in our property, it's usually a bucket list trip for them. So I want that trip to be a win. Man, I was in DC and I had a great time and I loved my place, right? So that's a win. The second win is some of these homeowners are either single parents or short on cash. This extra revenue makes it so they can spend more time with their kids. So they're not working extra hours. So they can actually go on the field trips. So that second win is that homeowner whose property we're taking care of now makes them more money and they get to spend more time with their family. And then the third win is, we get to put food on the table of our employees. So my drive is not greed. My drive is to deliver great experiences for everyone, right? I've had hosts thank me, literally, man, I can spend more time with my kids. I've had guests thank me. Guests spend $6,000 on a stay and go, wow, thank you, Karl, that was great, right? If you've given someone so much value that after they've given you $6,000, they're the ones thanking you, you've really provided a service. And then the team, I've had team members like out on assignment where I'm like, hey, go onboard this new property. And they're enjoying the onboarding process. And they're like, I love this job. They literally text me, I love my job. Dude, how many wins is that? And I'm making money, but we're taking care of everybody at the same time. I don't know. That's my joy. That's my win.
I love it.
And then, luckily it has afforded me a decent living, but that's a bonus.
No, I love it. And being conscious about the fact that you can impact so many stakeholders along the way with your business. It's like, it's not just, a profit maximization, approach. It's like, hey, let's impact people's lives, guests' lives, employees' lives, everyone's lives along the way. Now, so going back to that article, audacious goals. You talk about, you gave the example of how Elon Musk, he's setting these goals of going to Mars and whatnot. Right. And when I was reading that, I was thinking, it's funny because in Elon Musk's, biography, they talk about a point where, he has SpaceX on one side, he has Tesla on another side. SpaceX, I think, had failed like 3 launches.
He was like living on a couch.
He was living on a couch, all of that. He was like, he had like money for like one more launch, which if he failed, the business would go under. And then Tesla, same thing. Tesla was going bankrupt. It was tough. They were over budget. All these things going on at the same time. So he has these 2 companies, and I'm thinking, about you with the 2 companies, right? And then people are there. Everyone is telling him, you got to choose your battles. If you don't choose between one or the other, both are gonna die. Both are gonna fail. Yet he was like, that's like asking me to choose between 2 children, of mine, and I only have so much food. So explain to me, when you're going through that rough beginning where you have the 2 businesses, like it's hard enough to try to start one business, it's hard enough to try to build one business from the ground up. There you are trying to start 2. What's going through your head? Are people telling you just choose your battles and pick one and stick to it? Is that not even something that's coming across? Like, what's going through your head?
I don't remember people saying that. I will say I have a best friend, and every now and then, or still a best friend, I would kind of say like, man, this isn't going too well. Maybe I need to pick one. But that wasn't often. It almost felt like I know this can work. I know this can work. Let's make it work. And I also had a strong belief in multiple streams of income. You know, they say don't put all your eggs in one basket. So that was really my logic. I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket. And, you know, if I double down on one and it fails, I really fail. So let me split this up and hopefully one of them survives. And luckily they both did. But it was more of I didn't want to put all my eggs in one basket mentality. And I'll say luckily and fortunately they worked out. But if I had to give someone advice, I would say focus on something, honestly. I would. Focus on something and do it well. That's not what I did, but you should probably focus on something.
It's not what Elon did either. So listen, we got two examples right here of not focusing on one thing.
Right. So yeah. So I don't know. Maybe what I did was the right move, right? It's not the all eggs in but one basket. But you know, one advice I actually gave someone recently was effing do it. Is really the advice, right? If someone comes to me with an idea, you heard of the Snuggie blanket, and they came to me, right? I would have probably said, you know what? I'm not sure I buy one, but do it. Go do it, right? Because there's so many people who will come to me with an idea, and then when I check with them a year later, they're like, oh, man, yeah, I haven't really done anything with that yet. It's like, really? What? Just do it. Oh, well, you know, someone else made something like it. No, do it. There's Coca-Cola and there's Pepsi and they're both doing fine. You know, so there's just do it is really it. I don't know, to borrow the term from Nike. That's what it is. Do something. If it's two things, I guess do two things, but don't do zero. You know,
don't do zero. I love it. No, that's amazing. Now let's talk a little bit about great dwellings, because the growth you had was tremendous. I mean, you've realized this. You were saying earlier, you've realized lately how big and successful you guys are. When you told someone, well, we have a couple hundred properties, and they were surprised. Yes, it's surprising. You know, that's a lot of properties. What are you at now in terms of number of properties that you've got total?
You know, I hired a company president and he has advised me I shouldn't share that number anymore, but it's gotten big. You probably know the number though. You and I have talked.
I know the number. I know the number. But now that I know that it cannot be shared, I won't disclose it.
Exactly.
It's in the hundreds. But
it's in the hundreds.
Let's leave it at that.
And you know, we're talking to a couple of multifamily housing clients, so I actually see that number catapulting big time. But yeah, it's been good.
So, couple hundreds, you know, in the hundreds of properties in what, 7 years or so, more or less.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think was the main key to success as far as growth goes, as far as, you know, being able to scale goes? What was it that helped you? Was it just, you know, purely referrals? Was it purely, you know, you did a great job at just, you know, getting inbound leads through building an amazing website that, you know, just got a lot of traction? Like, what was your strategy to go from, you know, almost zero to hundreds of properties in 7 years?
Well, I want to double down on quality team members. A friend of mine joined the team early and just spent a lot of his time and effort helping to grow the business and building some key things that we do every day now that were a testament to his involvement. He was a project manager and brought a lot of those project management technology or methodologies to our company. You know, he's transitioned, in fact, started his own successful IT business now, and you know, has some equity and that was cool. So team is huge, right? If I had to pick one thing, it's team. But the second thing you touched on was a great website that was search engine optimized. I think I had the benefit of building an SEO website when the bar was a little bit lower. You know, you had to say enough keywords enough times and get mentioned a couple places, and you could actually do link building, and it would grow and it would hit. You know, Google is really refining its search engine algorithm regularly. Now SEO is what they call EEAT, and it means, you know, you have to have authority in your field and be trustworthy, and it's more about building that as opposed to just keywords. So I'm not sure you could repeat the what worked for me back then, but luckily at the time, search engine optimization was saying the right keywords and the proper link building. So that plus a good team. And then, like I said, the friend moved on. I brought on a company president actually. So, realizing when I needed help, even on that regards. And so that company president was exactly what we needed at that stage. So my friend, he was great to get us from 12 to, I don't know what, let's say 50. And then this guy has, his name is John, has experience as literally a VP at AOL and then a few startups and some pretty large companies, got us, like you said, to the several hundred range. And now where VCs are literally coming to us asking to invest in us. And, we're saying, no, thank you. Not right now. So if you're watching this, VCs, we will take VC money at some point. But right now, we still feel like we're undervalued because our growth has just been so tremendous that if you came in where we are today, we wouldn't get valued at where we know we can be. But, it was like the right CEO at the time, right? So if you know this, Google has transitioned to CEOs, but Eric Schmidt was perfect at those beginning days where they gave everybody a day to spend on building your business. Now they don't do that more now. And now they charge for YouTube music and stuff, right? Because the new CEO is right for where they are. And so super long answer to say SEO and quality team members.
And yeah, there's wartime CEOs and there's peacetime CEOs and there's
right.
CEOs when you're starting to scale, CEOs when you hit a certain plateau and you're trying to optimize, or when you're trying to cost save, right? You're more in an optimization phase. So I guess two things, when you go through that transition of you running most of the day to day, I guess you did that for some time. And then putting in someone that would actually take care of the day-to-day, and then eventually even changing that person, right? Even upgrading or changing that person. What became your personal contributions? Like where do you think that you as the founder and where do you find yourself strategically involved nowadays? What do you think are the most important contributions you can focus on?
No question. It is moving barriers out of everyone's way. So, we've got hundreds of properties in Mexico now. And so it's, okay, how do we operate in Mexico? Oh, you know what? We're going to need a Mexican bank, corporate entity, a Mexican bank account. We're going to need to get that person a debit card, right? Those are things you can't necessarily just give to an employee. So now it's removing barriers to help those team members succeed. Now we're managing so many properties in DC that, okay, you need a Home Depot account because you're spending hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars a day in Home Depot. You need a expense reporting tool. So now we're negotiating with an expense reporting service that would charge thousands a month. And we were able to get that down to fraction. So now it's less of the day to day, right? I don't know how many trouble tickets are open, but I know that we needed a trouble ticket system. So we actually hired a consultant to stand up HubSpot, to build HubSpot, right? Because we noticed when we were 12 properties, you could discuss everything in Google Chat and everything got accounted for, right? Once you hit 100 properties, Google Chat is going so fast, you can't see what went off the screen and then did that get addressed or not, right? So we went from Google Chat to Help Scout to now HubSpot Service Hub because the team needed a quality infrastructure. So my job is not plunging toilets anymore, which it was. My job is removing boundaries and hurdles to give the team the opportunity to be successful at their job.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Listen, I see the time, and I told you this was going to be hard to cut this at an hour, because I'm telling you I could go on for 2 more hours here. I think we would have enough topics to discuss. I guess I just want to finish with, just trying to wrap up. I think a key takeaway that you've repeated is the importance of having the right team, putting the right people in place. You talked about at the beginning how as a property management company, you go through this phase where you're too small to be able to afford the kind of team that you would want or need.
Right.
So you're almost having to get more owners just to get to a point where you can afford that kind of an infrastructure.
Yes.
And it goes on the team side of things, and it goes on the technology side of things as well, that you need to grow to a certain volume in order to afford that kind of an infrastructure. I want to ask you, how would you advise, if a property management company is looking at scaling with this dilemma of like, I'm going through this phase where I'm too small to afford top talent, but I need to grow a lot more in order to afford that kind of talent. Like, how do you attract that top talent when perhaps it's a bit too early? How did you go about attracting talent of the like of John, right? Whom I've met as well, and it's impressive. I mean, amazing background, but not every property manager, is it selling the vision? Is it just showing them like, you're coming in early, but here's all the amazing plans and everything we're going to accomplish? Is it just compensation? What has been your approach of attracting that top talent that sometimes is hard to bring on and also retain when you're perhaps too small to be able to afford that traditionally and compete with those, those larger companies that could be going, after that same talent?
So I'll tell you what I did. Is it the recipe that can be repeated every time? I'm not positive. But what I did was I networked. And it actually was a muscle that took some developing, and then I'm still not good at, but it was getting out there, meeting people, making your name known. So I went to, at the time, Airbnb used to have a conference called Airbnb Open. So I attended a few of those open conferences. I started meeting people there. Luckily, I met a young lady by the name of Ziona. In fact, she's pretty big in the Airbnb world now. You may have heard of her. And, we hit it off as friends, and, we would literally chat with each other every now and then. Man, how's business going for you? I got X number of properties. It's starting to be more work than I wanted. Or, you know what, I got to hire. Or, man, maybe I should be just consulting for my hours. And, so we're chatting. And then I'm leaning on tools like Guesty. And Guesty had some services that were helpful. So it was networking. And so someone went to Ziona and actually said, hey, one of my best hires went to Ziona and said, hey, I loved you on the podcast. I'm moving to DC. Do you have anything in DC? And she was like, no, but I know a guy. And it was me. So I got that great hire because I met a person who knew a person, and then actually my second hire, that was my second hire. My first hire actually emailed Guesty and said, hey, I really want to get into short-term rentals. I know this is what you guys do. Well, luckily, I had met the owners of Guesty at the time, and one of the co-founders were like, we're not really boots on the ground, but if you live in DC, why don't you talk to Karl? And so I got my first hire from Guesty, literally referring that person, and the next one, Ziona. And then when I was building websites for the nightclub, I built a website for the nightclub. Then I built it for one of their guest artists, right? Literally like Jay-Z and all these big people would come in. Well, one guy came in who was a local DC artist, and I befriended him, and I built his website, and we became good friends. And then one day he introduced me to John for very different reasons. John and I stayed in touch, and he was actually a mentor to me as I tried Smarter Vote, as I tried different things. And then when I told him about the business, it wasn't even to bring him as a mentor, as a CEO. It was, man, VCs want to offer us this much, but they want this much. And he was like, you know what? Let me come in here. I'll make it worth even more. And this whole thing is going to be bigger and better. And we'll improve the operations. And so that mentor turned into, company president. So, is that a repeatable recipe? I'd say yes, from the example of network, right? Don't try to do it all yourself. Don't be a hermit. Get out there and know people and let people know what you're doing. And it should benefit you and when you're trying to build your team. But at the same time, don't be greedy, right? If you've got to afford top talent, pay them what you can. Luckily, I had another stream of income, so I didn't need to siphon that money to myself. And there was another component I was going to say that pay them what you can. Make sure they feel valuable. If equity is what you got to do. So John, I couldn't afford John's salary at first. So, we had to give him equity, and, he grew the business to the point where now it can pay him well. So, you got to get creative.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And Karl, do you have 2 more minutes? 2 more minutes?
Sure.
I want to end with your mindset, and you've answered in the past that one thing you want to leave in terms of what you want to be remembered for is the mindset of doing everything with love.
Yes.
So I want you to maybe just talk to us a little bit about how do you put that in practice? How do we operationalize a mindset of doing things with love, and why do you think that is important?
So, I could go a couple of ways with that, but it's important for how it makes people feel, right? How do your guests feel when you've set out almost a meal when they check in? It's not a meal, but you've traveled all day and you finally get there and you ran out of food, and oh wow, there's drinks and there's a couple things to snack on. That was doing, the check-in process with love. When, my accountant reached out to me and he goes, "Hey, I'm closing the books and I realized we underpaid 2 people to the tune of a few grand, but they didn't notice. What do you want to do?" Dude, we're going to pay them. Like, we're not going to keep their money, right? You're going to do it with love. And the adage I told an employee when they asked me about that, and one other thing was, when you're old and on a rocker and your grandchild is on your lap and you're retelling the story, what version of that story do you want to tell your grandchild? I kept their money, right? No, you're going to say, I did the right thing. I gave them their money because, I owed it to them, right? You're doing it with love. You want a legacy that you could be proud of. Your kids could be proud of, your grandkids. So you do things with love because it makes other people feel good. And in turn, you feel good about yourself. I think so. You can almost make it selfish, right? In the end, you feel good about yourself, but be unselfish, and it actually turns out that way.
Love it, Karl. Where can people follow? Where can people stay in touch? And what can we expect to see from Karl, from Great Dwellings, and from NetAesthetics in the coming years?
So I'm pretty big on LinkedIn as far as activity. I wouldn't say big. I'm pretty active on them. So you can find me. Just search for Karl Scarlett or Rashid Karl Scarlett, and then I'm standing up a new website that kind of where I just talk about anything from hospitality to business to whatever. It's going to be Rashid.ai. By the time this video comes out, I think it'll be live. But I literally write some GPTs on there, like custom GPTs, because I'm a tech at heart. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff on Rashid.ai, and we plan on launching that literally in a couple of days.
Oh man, we're gonna have to do another episode just to talk about AI, which we didn't touch on. Can you believe we didn't talk about AI? Anyway, I'm telling you, man, we're gonna have to do another one. But listen, Karl, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. Truly inspiring story. Many nuggets, and I really appreciate you having taken the time.
Yeah. Thank you so much. One thing I didn't say earlier, I got to take 30 seconds is to plug your company. If you're trying to grow a property management business, lean on a company like yours, where you don't need to build as strong of a big of a business, right? You don't need to hire full-time people if your team can provide those services. So I'm not sure that was the angle you were going for, but it is legit the truth, where you don't need a full-time person, all these capabilities that your company provides those resources in. And I mean that wholeheartedly.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's Angel Host.
Angel Host,
right.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Karl, thank you so much. Have a great one.
All right, thank you. You too. Bye.